All right. Welcome to Serial Intellectual Podcast. And today I have joined with me Pastor Greg and Pastor Charlie. They're both from Baltimore City. Go Ravens. How you guys feeling? I know one of you is a traitor to Baltimore in terms of fandomhood. And I am the Fairweather fan, or I like to say I'm the realistic guy. But
Hmm.
we have a blood bleeding Ravens fan on here. Uh, I know
That's
he's
right.
happy about Derrick Henry coming.
Yeah, King Henry is going to definitely make a difference for us. So, I'm pumped.
But,
I'm pumped about it.
so we're here today to talk about a subject that's going viral, and a lot of people are talking about it. It's the subject of, is the Black church doing enough for the community? That's the question. Is the Black church doing enough for the community? And I wanted to bring these guys in. They are pastors. They pastor in the city of Baltimore, and they've got history, decades of histories with the Black church and all different types of denominations and social economic statuses, different cities. And I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about that before we jump in. But that's what we're going to tackle today, because I think there's some more that could be said about this subject. And so let's get into that. So first, guys, before we get into the subject, why don't you just take a minute and tell the listeners where you're from and the context in which you have served, the various contexts in which you served in terms of the Black church.
Mm. Go ahead, Pastor Greg.
Appreciate it. So, quick and dirty. I'm from Baltimore, raised in Baltimore, born and bred. So, spent my entire existence here in this city, in and around this city. As far as how I've served in different areas, and I've served in different contexts. So what I simply mean by that is I've been a minister in the traditional Black church. I've also served in the non-denominational church. And when I said traditional, initially I was referring to like a Baptist church. Then I was in a non-denominational church, and I currently serve in I would consider us to be a majority Black church, but we are part of the SBC. So we have kind of a multi-generation, multi-ethnic context, but majority of our congregation just so happens to be Black. So I've served in multiple capacities. I've been a youth pastor, actually did a church plant, and now I'm serving as an associate pastor at the church where I am currently today. So I do have some experience with different economic statuses, and also I would even say cultural statuses, because Baltimore has lots of different cultures here, and I'm sure we can touch on that, as we get to this conversation. But I've served in various different contexts of the cultures that are represented here in Baltimore.
Mm. Yeah, I'm a native Floridian, and so most of my life I've been engaged in some type of church attendance. From before my parents became Christians, they would send me to Sunday school down the street to the local missionary Baptist church. So my dad would give me $1 and say, put 50 cents in the Sunday school, and then on your way home, buy you a piece of candy from the corner store, that type of thing. So I've had those as early memories. Mom got radically saved. We were a part of Church of God in Christ, denomination, Black Pentecostal charismatic movement, and so teenage years, after the death of my father, was a part of an Assembly of God mega church, so predominantly white, large mega church with a big emphasis on international missions. So that's where I got my experience, early ministry, speaking, being able to travel abroad, seeing what the church does kind of from a global perspective, versus more of a neighborhood centric approach that I had been a part of. So yeah, we had all different types of things like that. and then planted a church in inner city Baltimore and Northeast Baltimore, predominantly African American, probably 98% African American. And so been in a lot of different church expressions, and now coaching church planters, black and brown, mostly on the East Coast. So lots of different experiences, international, national, neighborhood-centric, church plant, established, mega church. So yeah, been around the block with these churches quite a bit.
Yes, you have. Both you guys have. And of course, my experience was 14 years in Baltimore City, leading a church, planting churches, and leading church planting for about 13, 14 years. So let's get into this. So I sent you guys a clip, and it's a narrative and it's talking points. But the issue is the Black church doing enough for the community? And so when I sent you the initial clip, what were some of your thoughts on the talking points that were in the video? What were some of the, just give me like one thing that stood out to you. Pastor Greg, go ahead.
I think one of the things that it stood out simply because it's a part of this continuous narrative that is had as it relates to the Black church, and it immediately jumped at some sort of financial support, and so that is what I grabbed from it. Like when the question was posed, what is the church doing enough? The initial question that the young man asked the pastor was, how much does your church make? So then the angle became, hey, what are you doing to put back into the community from the funds that are coming from the community into your church? Right. And so it stood out to me just because that's what you normally hear, particularly in a low to mid income context. You're gonna see people seeking to have their needs met, and primarily financially is how that is. The approach to that is through financial means. So that's what stood out to me. It's like, I don't want to call it rhetoric, but it was basically what you always hear as it relates to not only the Black church, if I can be honest, but to church in general. What are you doing with the money that you have to give back to the community that you're in? Yep.
What were your thoughts, Pastor Charlie?
Yeah, thing that jumped out to me was kind of in the Black church is always considered at its pinnacle in the civil rights movement. So I think he made mention of, y'all need to be doing more like you did back in the civil rights movement, as if things are not different culturally, economically, experientially. That's still kind of the pinnacle of what we see as the Black church. So that stood out to me, is just like there is a mental picture, like a locked kind of mental picture in the minds of maybe this generation or whoever of what the Black church is and what it should be and how it should serve Black people.
Yeah, let's go there for a minute. So I think this is really important. So I've observed the same thing, that 99% of the people who talk about this issue have the Black church in the 60s and have Black people in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Would you guys agree that that's fair? We're not trying to judge. We're just saying, if you listen to what they're saying we should, the church today should be like the church in the civil rights movement.
Yeah, absolutely. No argument there. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because Black people are in a similar position as they were in the 60s.
Right. Well, that seems to be the correlation that they're making.
100%.
You need to be doing the same things they were back then, because we're still struggling with the same institutional systemic issues that they were back then.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I could see, I have just a few takes. I'd love to get your take on this. First of all, when we say the Black church in the civil rights movement, what Black churches? Because I'm not saying that there weren't Black churches involved in the civil rights movement, but there were a significant amount of black churches that were not involved in the civil rights movement. If my history tells me right, that Martin Luther King today is not Martin Luther King 60 years ago. Today he's famous, but back then he was infamous. I mean, his own father encouraged him not to do this. He's gonna be a troublemaker. So, so it's interesting to me about the idea of like the black church, because it's almost like, well, this is what the whole black church was doing. And then the other take on it is, I don't think black people are in the same position.
Right.
I'm not saying there aren't things that are problematic about America and about the culture in which African Americans live in, but to say there's a one-to-one correlation, as the narrative seems to suggest, I think is faulty. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I think that there's almost like this. I'll just describe it as deification of the church, the black church, and in its heyday, or at its pinnacle, as it was stated. That's where people look to, and you can see that even in how we view civil rights leaders today, because there's still this desire to look back in order to determine what needs to be done, as opposed to acknowledging the present and then determining who from this generation has those interests at heart and how we can then move forward. So we constantly look in reverse. So you have that sense with the church that's like solid and in place within the black community. And the fact that there's been significant changes since the 50s, since the 60s till today, that seem to go, and I'll say seem, unacknowledged. Like when we start to talk about the church and what needs to be done, there's always this run back to how bad it used to be, when in fact we can all be honest in this space. There are still problems that blacks have to face in this country. There's still issues with separatism, racism, etc. Those things exist, but the difference is it's not like it was before. Like it was legal before, and there was no real repercussions for that type of stuff before. Now, with the advent of cameras and all these amendments to laws, etc., there are repercussions, and it might be imbalanced, but it's been an improvement. So, my take on it is that there's just this lack of a desire to leave the past in the past, and just to appreciate it, but not live in it. And that's how I see. Yeah, that I think that's the position that I see us in as it relates to the black church.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike, in your two initial assessments. Like, I'm not sure, I'm not a historian, or expert, but from what I've read and studied and experienced, not as many people were involved in the civil rights movement as it can seem looking backward. So it can seem as if there was 100% buy-in to the civil rights efforts back then. And obviously we want to cherry pick those individuals who were the tip of the spear for making those things happen. But as you dig deeper, it's quickly that you realize, man, these people were infamous, as you said, Mike, in their communities for stirring up trouble. And so I'm from a part of Florida where we don't have a lot of those pillars of individuals who were just, advocating for, we need to disrupt the system, because they were so oppressed and dealing with the things they were dealing with in parts of Florida and South Florida. So yeah, and then I came from a Pentecostal tradition. There's not a lot of huge emphasis on their role in big political movements in black circles. Now, spiritual movements, Azusa Street, revivalism, You know what I mean? Spirituality, all of those things. There's a huge emphasis on those areas, but you don't hear a lot. Not saying that there isn't any, but you don't hear a lot about their political and civic engagement in those spaces at that time. So
Yeah.
that's the one side. And then the second side is, I would say, like you said, the fallout of, in the best possible ways, the implications of the civil rights movement dynamically changed Black people and Black culture. So there's a diversity of experiences within that we are not the same cultural milieu that we were in the 50s and 60s today in the 2020s. And so that's where I love to dive into those kind of conversations, because I'm like, man, to assume that we are the same groups of people that are at this point is literally our great grandparents. It ain't even our grandparents, it's our great grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we're not struggling with the same issues. We didn't have the same access to information, access to capital, freedom to travel, move about, exchange ideas, just internet access, business entrepreneurship, home ownership. We talking about a whole different set of issues and problems that we're wrestling with. So I'm in agreement with you that we're in a different world than what we see back in the 60s.
Yeah, and so one of the things that happens in the video too is, and I've seen this in multiple videos like this. There are people who don't go to church, who aren't, in this case, atheists,
Right.
telling the church what it should be doing. Now, I go to church. I've pastored churches, I've planted churches. You guys, same thing. I'm not coming at this from like, who are you to tell me? But I find it really interesting that people, I guess, have such a strong opinion. Hey, the church should be doing this, and I want to know from what they're saying, what do they think the mission of the church is? Like, if we had to say, based on these comments, because there's tons of videos like this out here, what is the mission of the church? Because it seems to me that their definition of the church is a place where you put money in and it goes right back out into the community. So it basically functions, as the guy actually said in the video. He says, if your church makes $100,000, you can start a bank with that. So the idea is that the church should just be a bank.
Right.
Did I get that wrong? Or because that's kind of what I'm hearing. It should be money in, money out, but specifically it should be Afrocentric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Black centric.
Right.
Money from Black people to the Black institution to be put back out into the Black community with prejudice in the good sense. Did I miss that, or am I on to something?
No, I think you spot on, bro. If he was sounding real Pan-African, if you ask me. That's really what it was sounding like. Black dollars for Black people.
Yeah, but
that was it.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Only that I find it interesting that it seems to be in every one of these cases that is the mission of the church.
Right.
That is the mission. The mission of the church is to go into a Black community, open up. I don't know how they open up with what dollars, sustain themselves. I don't know how they do that either. But to take money from grandma, put it in an account, and then get other Black people to then give that money back out to the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That is the mission of the church.
Right. Yeah, there is no sense of understanding that the church has a mission in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the benefits or the ancillary gifts that come out of the church are these kind of social programs, or all the compassion of things that we serve in the community. But that's because we have a mission that we're trying to accomplish. But in their mind, similarly, like it's like saying, why aren't black banks doing that in Black communities? Like, there's Black banks that are started. Here in Baltimore, we got Black banks. Atlanta, you got Black established, owned, minority-led banks. But it's like the bank is only there to invest and give people money. You would never just assume that you could just roll up to a bank, because it's black owned, white owned, whatever. And this, I just want money because you guys hold the money that people put into you. And it's like, nah, why would you think that's what we do? But that's an assumption. The church doesn't exist in and of itself. The church exists to provide for us. Period. In the story.
Yeah, and
to tag on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, to tag on to that, I think that some of it stems from this sense of ownership, which is rooted in ethnic identity. Because if it's our church, and even if they're not attached to it in any way, it's still ours because of our common ethnic background. And so you have a push coming from that. That's the attitude towards the church. You should be doing for us regardless, because we are the people that this church represents. And so the mission of the church and what God ordained for the church is secondary to that sense of ownership that's rooted in ethnic identity.
So I want you to think about something I picked up. And I think this is irrefutable sociologically. So if you look back to the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, I mean, even people like Dr. Umar, any Pan-Africanist, any pro-Black, Nation of Islam, everyone says this. Even white people say this. There was more care, concern, provision, opportunity in terms of Black people taking care of Black people. Sociologically, if someone argues that, I don't know how they're going to argue that. Okay, but here's what's interesting. So when we talk about we should be what the Black church used to be, here's my question. Was it the Black church that was taking care of Black people? Or, because there's an assumption in there that I think you could miss. Or was it Black culture and the fabric of Black culture, which was family and community and unity, which was in one sense pressed together by Jim Crow and racism and all that pressed it together. So that's what actually was the magic. And yes, more Black people went to church than now. And yes, there was more religiosity. But was it the Black church that built Black Wall Street, as it's so called? Was it the Black church that took care of kids? Was it, or was it the community?
I would lean towards where you're going, because there weren't many institutions. So if we've got limited points of expression that are welcome in a hostile environment, which we would say in Jim Crow, all of these eras, it's difficult to create these institutions and spaces. But church in a religious culture, okay, this is a safe environment for these Black people and minority groups to collectively get together. Cool. But I think it goes to what you're saying. It's not necessarily that the institution itself was the one leading the charge. Is that's where the educated, it's where all the classes of people in the community could get together to collectively share their voice. Outside of that, you didn't have you don't have anything else to have you don't have a platform. You don't have a platform. But the culture in and of itself, which is what we would, you do hear this in a lot of different thought leaders, Black thought leaders and all of that. Black people aren't the same. If we would just stick together, if we would just get back together like the old days, grandma and grandpa used to stick together. He would cheat and walk out, but grandma would just stay there. No, there's a different culture that allowed for those types of things to stick together because there were no alternatives. But when you create space for alternatives, Now this thins out, like you said, the voice or the platforms or the institutions that are going to express these different ideals at large.
Yeah, I agree completely. I even made a quick note to myself. I said it was by default and it was there's no choice. And so when you have to come together, then you find a way and you make the means to do whatever needs to be done. But as time went on and liberties were given, and then we had the ability or the right to have our voice heard, to be in spaces where we weren't normally. Now the subgroup, which was us, started to splinter, and now you could now where once there was, okay, we all have to come together in order to congregate and be heard and strategize and make noise, etc. Now I don't have to. I don't have to, I don't have to go to the church. I can meet with my friends at a, at a restaurant that my income allows me to be. So now I'm around intellectual blacks, and I don't have to be around people who have a limited education. I don't have to collaborate with you anymore. So now my interest becomes what's best for me and this subset of African Americans, and so it splinters out. So I agree with you with where you were going. Also, I think that it was by default. We had no choice, and the culture just allowed for the culture demanded that we do it at that time, but it's totally different now. So it's several different voices that can be heard.
It's interesting too, because historically, if we want to bring the Bible into this, I arguably in the first century, where the church gets its notoriety or notoriousness, however people want to view history, all of this helping that's going on, let's just take Jesus out of it and post-Jesus stuff, Book of Acts type epistle stuff. All this helping and widows and orphans that the church got a reputation for. We say the church got a reputation for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
We always say the church was doing this. The church is not a building. The church is people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say the church should do this and the church should do that, church not a bank. Church is not Walmart. The church consists of people. So if you have 100 people in a church and 50 of them decide that we're going to make sure that every kid in the school where our church building is at, every kid that's going to that school has a backpack and has all the supplies they need, and all the teachers have all what they need, right? They decide, because this is what really happens. It's not always church driven, it's people driven 99% of the time. Then those people do it, and then the church gets the credit. Oh, because they go to the church. The church did that. And sometimes they'll make it an outreach of the church. I'm not here to say the church isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, because I've already made a video about that. Like, the church is guilty of sin in so many ways. Like, the church is the easiest institution to pick on, because they put all their values out there and then they don't measure up. So like, I mean, the only institution that might be easier to pick on is the United States government, because they go, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self, and all men are created equal. It's like, oops, you know what I mean? But here's what I want to get to. The church is made up of individuals. And it seems to me that this narrative of what the church should be doing is not doing enough institutionalizes the church, and in a really weird way blames the institution and then lets the individuals off the hook. And then when the individuals do what they're supposed to be doing, right, it's often like, well, those are individuals. Like, there's something about institutionalizing the church and not realizing that the church is made up of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And as the individuals go, so goes the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing to point out, especially from that video, the fact that you can have a panel now that you can throw a net out and grab a bunch of black atheists, lets you know that we're in a much different time. You could not be a black atheist
Hello.
50, 60 years ago and then
No, sir.
just live a comfortable life. Like, the culture was so much more religious that you could not be somebody with a secular worldview and then just function in society, which is why a lot of the civil rights leaders, when you go back and a lot of them were different lifestyles, philosophies, all of that, but they needed the church to be able to leverage their voice in intellect because they couldn't outright critique the church because that was the only institution we had, right? Exactly. Whatever. So that's one piece. But like you said, we're individuals now. We're fully American, even though we pull out this whole idea about being I went and watched some more of the videos. We need to put you need to put your blackness ahead of your Christianity politically. I think he goes on,
or at least equal.
He said at least equal.
Or at least equal.
Reference is above, but at least equal.
Right. And I'm going to myself, bruh, so you assume all black people are the same and have had the same experience, but we're all individual. Like, do not put your political ideology on me, bruh. Like, you don't know where I come from. We have become atomized, in this American culture. So as much as we would love to be able to go back and say, yeah, my blackness is at the top of no, that's not the top of my identity, depending on who you're talking to, where they're coming from, what their experience has been. So yeah, every church institutionally is going to look different because of the individual's context, so on and so forth, in that particular church. That's the second thing. Third, I laugh about, man, the church should be doing all this stuff when the latest studies would tell us the average size of a church in America is 75 people.
That's generous.
And so that puts a way different spin on this conversation.
Wait. I got to intercept right there. Okay, because hold on, because this is going to make the point even more demonstrable.
Right.
If the average size of a church is 75, and you know how we be about our numbers. Sorry, church.
Yeah. Slightly inflated.
Yeah, there's about 75 people in the room today.
About 75 means 50.
Okay, but think about this. Okay, wait. If the average size of the church in America is 75, what percentage are African Americans or Black Americans, or whatever the political correct name?
13%. Yeah.
Okay. So if
where you're going now.
If the average size is 75, but the Black church, the constituents that go to the Black church only make up 13%, you were in Newark, you've been in Baltimore your whole life. I was there for 14 years. The average size of the churches in Baltimore City is not 75 people.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, it's not 75 people.
No.
Right.
It's
sub 50.
You're right. Yeah, it's not 75 people. I guarantee you, it's minus 50 people. That's right. Generous.
That's right.
So sorry to interrupt you, but keep going. Your argument is, if it's only 75, but for Black Americans, it ain't 75. It's smaller than that.
Smaller than that. More than likely, you've got a bivocational pastor.
Bingo.
Who this isn't his full-time job.
Yep.
And you're expecting your grandmother to be making the type of investment into this institution that allows for the output of these types of other institutions that we can be building and all of this. So what I'm saying is, a lot of times we're fighting with ghosts. You're fighting with the 1% of Black churches that exist. These political pastoral leaders that are out there, but they're 1% of all of these people that exist because they have the megaphone. But there's rarely any of those churches. There's one per city, usually, One of those pastors, or maybe two.
Yeah.
And if you're in a black city, you might get three.
Right.
But but then they become the national voice that you're arguing. Why isn't the black church doing anything?
Mhm.
When you're
Great
beating
point.
up the guy who's
Great.
selling insurance
Great.
with 30 people in it.
Great point. Yeah. I would guess that in Baltimore City, how many churches over 1,000, black churches in 1,000 exist in Baltimore City? Just take a guess. I don't know the number, but I was there for 14 years. Pastor Greg, you've been there your whole life. Just take a
That's
round.
great.
Over
Give me
1,000.
But yeah, between this number and that number, what would your between number be?
Dude, if I had to guess, I would say it's, if we talking black churches, I would
Yep.
say it's maybe 5 where that's the case.
What would you say, Pastor Charles?
Yeah, you can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say the majority of churches in Baltimore City have less than 50 people. When I say less, I don't mean like 47. I mean probably somewhere between 15 to 30 people.
Oh, come
40
on, man. You know, the
40 people is a lot
storefront
of
church is a thing.
Yeah.
The storefront church still exists.
Yeah. But your
That's right.
point, Charlie, is what I'm getting at. Like, so then you're chasing the ghosts and you're chasing the 1%ers. And there's something, I don't know what it is. I think I know what it is. Actually, I know what it is. There's something that bothers me when I watch these videos too about people and they talk about money. He even said in the video, I'm not talking about turkeys and what did he say?
Sneakers.
Turkeys and shoes.
Or shoes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time out. He said, I'm not talking about turkeys.
Hmm.
That's food.
That's food. And we applaud Rick Ross when they do it.
Oops.
Rappers come through with the turkey.
Great.
That's a
Turkey
great
is
thing when they do it.
food. Jesus fed people. Church is supposed to be like Jesus. Oops. Okay, and then the other one was
that's a 1-to-1.
one other one was shoes.
That's a need.
That's a care.
Yeah.
Babies need shoes.
Oh, okay,
Come
so
on.
this is okay. Tell me what you think about this. So this is what I think. I think when people from this perspective that we're questioning, like the young man, and by the way, he's a brilliant young man, brilliant,
Yeah,
guy,
absolutely.
smart. I'd love to talk with him. Great guy,
Absolutely.
intelligent. I think there's an obsession with money.
Mm.
No, I don't think I know. I'm convinced. And it's a classic, in my opinion, narrative that a lot of people hold is they don't like people giving a lot of money to an institution and then not seeing that institution do what they think the institution should do with said money.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I don't care if the institution is putting shoes on people and giving them turkeys and keeping families together and talking people out of suicide and paying for funerals and that. No. I'm talking about down payments for houses. Like, oh, I didn't know that was a church's job. I didn't know. I'm not saying it's whatever, but like,
Right.
but I think there's an obsession with money. And it makes me think of this text where Jesus said, is your eye evil because my hand is good?
Mm.
It's very interesting to me that I thought about this and I actually looked this up. I looked up how much money Baltimore City, what's the Baltimore City revenue in taxes? And it's like 38 million or 39 million dollars or 40 million dollars last year, right?
Mm.
You guys want, like, what do you think the church has raised? You think the church has raised $39 million?
No.
Think the churches did 10% of that, which would be $3.9 million? No. I mean, maybe 20%.
Maybe.
20% might be
Maybe, yeah.
maybe $6 million.
Mm.
I mean, a healthy church budget from a church of 150 is like what, $300,000, $400,000.
Right.
We've already established those aren't the. So I guess there's something about this money thing, this obsession with money, with who's giving it, who's receiving it, and what they're doing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
we don't typically have a problem with that that fiscal exchange in with any other institution but the church.
Yeah,
we do
have
a problem with that. You know, like I've got a problem with my taxes. Like before coming down here for this podcast, my wife just said, "Hey, this is our bill for the year." Well, I'm upset. I don't want to pay, however much we going to have to pay. You know what I mean? I said, well, doggone it, Donald Trump don't have to pay taxes. Why I got to pay taxes? You know what I'm saying? There's potholes in this city. There's buildings falling down. There's, pipes need to be fixed, lead water.
No AC. No
right.
AC.
For the kids, and, all that. But listen, I still said, babe, next year, I don't want to be paying this much in taxes. Whatever we got to do, I don't want to have to pay this much in taxes. And so what do I want the benefits of paying the taxes, but I don't want to pay the taxes. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm going to critique the city. Y'all should have saved some money so that if a bridge falls down, we could just fix it overnight. Like all of these things are things I think, but I'm still going, I want to invest. I'm not investing in, you know what I mean, all of that. That's not my problem. I gotta eat. My kids need shoes. We need things that we want to do. Go on vacation. I want to go on vacation. And so it's the same thing, and we don't have the same values as our grandmothers did. Your grandmother invested in that church because she believed in Jesus, not necessarily because she believed in the preacher. And for him, you thought she was investing in retirement. That wasn't her retirement plan. She was doing that as unto the Lord. And then she knew the Lord would take care of her. You see it as she's been mistreated. And in some cases, that's true. But there's a different philosophy even at work in that whole exchange there, with those expectations that the finances should immediately have a direct implication and outcome that a lot of these folks didn't even expect it was going to be a one-to-one transaction.
Yeah, it's like the reason that the church is viewed like it is because the worldview that we have as it relates to other entities, like the way that we view government, we have rights, we have a say, we vote, we get to demand what's done. When it comes to things like the government, when it comes to like schools, our voice matters. And so I'm not surprised that that's the position of the world, that they have this view that even the church falls up under that, because now I have a right to have my voice heard, and my voice there should spare some sort of action. And so you got this view that the world has, which is diametrically opposed to the view that we have, because we know that the church is not the world's, and they don't have control and say so over the church. And that's why there's the constant bumping of heads, because they're running into this thing like, well, in my mind, if I give my money, and we view it differently. Obviously, we're supporting the church, we're giving to the kingdom. But in my mind, if I give my money, there should be some sort of return, and I should have some sort of say on what that looks like. And so that it's just they try to impose that view onto the church, and that's where we get this constant butting of heads.
Yeah. So as we close out, what can you guys think of any solutions to this? Because I love solutions. I hate talking about problems and not having solutions. So what are some potential solutions to all of this?
All those people get saved and start coming to church and learn what it means to be a Christian.
Right.
I think dialogue is important. Just to in all seriousness, there's gonna have to be, some dialogue, but you don't want to. We also don't want to cast our pearls before swine. But at the same time, education helps. Having people know what the truth is, because if you're coming to me saying, "Hey, the church should be doing," and the guy, if you watch the videos, it's short, but he said the word "should" a dozen times
Mhm.
in there, like you should be doing, you should be doing, you should be doing. Well, sir, what are you basing that on? And if you're basing it on something where you're ignorant in a space where you don't have knowledge and understanding, then you're just throwing up words. So even if there's if there's ever an opportunity to like share truth, I think that helps to provide a solution, because even if you walk away an atheist, at least you'll have understanding, and then you don't have to speak from a position of ignorance, whether you agree with it or not.
I love it.
I think another thing is like for pastors, we do hide under the mystique and the deific or the mythology of like the civil rights movement. Like that gives us that sense of respect and honor in the community, even though that's fading very quickly. With every month, every year that comes, that mythology is fading with
Hmm.
respect to current everyday pastors, right?
Getting
But I do
swallowed up.
think there needs to be right, and so I do think there needs to be this kind of re-education of what it is. What's the church's role today? Like, what's our
Hmm.
role today? How do we serve and care for people during what they're calling the loneliness epidemic? What's our role and concern for when it comes to connecting people to meaning and purpose and identity, in a organic relational way, in real time, when you do have so many other avenues for help and support. So we're a part of a larger ecosystem at this point, but I think that's going to come with us acknowledging that we're not the mythical um, organization that we can kind of tend to be in the minds of our neighborhoods and culture, and
Hmm.
being honest about that. So I do think that's one area where we can do a better job of just kind of sharing and being vocal about our role in current society versus leveraging what we've done back in the day.
And I think also, and whether I'd be interested to see if you agree with this also, Pastor Charlie, but it requires us to have those conversations internally, because
Mm.
the church has embraced that as a position. Like we are, the pastors, there should be a certain level of respect and esteem that's associated with us that we carried on from those times. And oftentimes the church today doesn't even understand some of the error and still holding on to that. So, what are your thoughts on internal conversations also?
Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be a re-encultural re-enculturalization for our own folks, because
Hmm.
they'll quickly pedestalize you as a pastor and kind of put you in these, And so like it was interesting to me coming to a city like Baltimore, where you do have a lot of history of political engagement as a pastor, like, and
Hmm.
those two things almost become synonymous. And I'm like, nah, my role, I'm not political. I'm not engaged in that part of it. Like there's
Hmm.
some pastors that are gifted at it. That's what they feel
Hmm.
called to do. I don't
Yeah.
particularly, but I want to work with you. Right. And then having those constant conversations when it's like, no, we need you to go lead out front in that regard. And I'm like, bro, that's not what I'm here to do. And it's funny, going back to what Mike said, you bring the Bible into it. Jesus resisted those every
Hmm.
time they tried to get him to become a political leader in that regard. No, my duty is here to proclaim the kingdom, and it's a different kingdom than what you're expecting, right? So I think there needs to be that internal conversation we need to have amongst pastors in the body, to show that, hey, we got different giftings. But then again, bro, there's black Catholics, there's black Presbyterians, there's black, Baptist, progressive. There's 25 different kinds of black Baptists, first of all. So just saying,
Right.
oh, y'all black church just need to figure it out. It's like, bruh, if you
Yeah.
only understood,
Good luck
you're
with that.
looking at a broken mirror. Right. You're looking at a broken mirror and you're never going to
Hmm.
get a clear picture of what we're actually dealing with.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I would love. I feel like in a lot of these conversations, I have yet to see a conversation on YouTube or any part of social media where when the church is being attacked, not that it's being defended per se, but that someone's having conversations like these and they're asking questions like, you said should 7 times. What are you basing that on? Like
You
what?
own the church. You
Yeah.
own the. I'm like, you own the church.
What?
Own the church.
You're saying should. You're an atheist, and
Yeah.
you're saying the church should. Should sounds like moral to me.
Right.
We're,
And
like,
you shouldn't care what we do with our church, since you're an atheist. You don't have no concern about what
Exactly.
God said
well,
about
that's where I'm
anything.
from. And it's like, so are you
Yeah.
aware that most
Great.
sincere Christians believe, whether you agree or not, that the Bible is their should?
Mm-hmm.
So whether you agree with it or not, they're simply trying to follow what they think the Bible says the church should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible says the church should be doing some stuff that the church ain't doing. That's not the argument. We all know the church is jacked up from the best to the worst. But, you can come in and start talking about the church should be a bank and should be giving loans for houses. And it's like, there's so much stuff you haven't thought through in the scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, when I think about a solution, I like what both of you guys said. I like with perspectives, with sharing, with the conversations. But I also think a kind of old school word of apology, and not I'm sorry, but like in defense of. I think there's room for someone to say, hey, let me respond with this, right? And not just like tit for tat, like, no, here's why you're wrong on this. You just brought up Jesus. And it's funny because the guy said, yeah, Jesus was anti-capitalist. He was? I didn't know
He did
that.
say that.
I need chapter and verse, brother. I'm not a chapter and verse type. I'm gonna give you grace, but I need chapter and verse on that.
What? Like, again, right? Exactly. It's like, yeah, he was. I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me that. Like, what's capitalism to you? Because a lot of the rhetoric sounds social and communist in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just wondering, like, is that your view of Acts 2? Because that wasn't communism. Those were individuals who brought stuff to the church to be distributed. And they brought their stuff, and there was a famine, by the way. Mm-hmm. They weren't buying houses. They were not buying houses.
Right.
They were feeding people because they were starving, because there was a famine, something that nobody on any podcast knows anything about.
Right.
So it's like, I'd love for people to me, a solution is, well, then let's just get down to the nitty gritty and talk truth. Let's really bring it out and say, no, actually, it's not the church's job to give loans. And the church is not a financial institution. It is not a bank. That's not its mission. As a matter of fact, its mission is very offensive, even to its constituents half the time, because it's a go make disciples. How does that sound to you? Like, it doesn't sound good. So I think for me, part of the solution to me is the church saying, you're not going to tell us what we should be doing. We're going to tell you what we should be doing. And then we're going to hold ourselves accountable to what we should be doing. And when we fail, we're going to admit it, and we're going to repent, and we're going to try to do better. But you can tell us all day long what you think we should be doing, but we ain't doing that. We're doing what we should be doing.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah, that's crazy. But great discussions. Great stuff. We got a lot to learn. I appreciate you guys coming on. We're going to wrap up. And we'll hopefully some people will benefit from this content, and
absolutely,
we'll see how it rolls from there. And I would like to have this discussion again. Maybe we'll wait a week or two and we'll jump back on here, because I'm sure there'll be some new material and some new people. And next time we'll put up some clips and stuff and talk about it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Thanks for having me on,
Sounds
man.
good, Doug.
Yeah.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
you guys. We'll talk soon.
All right.
All right. Peace.
See ya.